Radical Reform, World's Oldest Person, and Hoarder's Dilemma. Welcome to Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Now, here's our first thought.
Shaking political foundations. Once established political parties were the norm, as they governed their members to conform. But when they all continually underperform, perhaps it's time for radical reform. Well, we have seen that Reform UK has, yes, swept the ball when it comes to local elections. First and notably is the Runcorn victory and Helsbury by-election, and they only won by 6 votes. But most importantly, overturned a 14,696 majority, an incredible achievement. When it comes to the local elections, they swept the board once again. Mr. Pete, I ask you, reform seem to be now being the new political way for the UK. Most importantly, what does this mean for Labour and the Conservatives?
Well, Mr. Mark, yes, I think that your final point is what I took from it. What does it mean for Labour and Conservatives who pretty much believe and have policies that are almost identical for the country, and they are part of the ruling or political elite that have been running this country, them and to a smaller extent the Liberal Democrats, been running the country for since the time of the past 20 years at least, going back to the time of Blair. And look what we've ended up with. We've ended up with a country which is changing out of all recognition socially and culturally. Maybe the old Britain may be lost forever. It's economically foundering. It's poorer than it was by a long way, and the world in which we operate is less safe. So I think, the message that is sent to Conservatives, Labour and Liberal Democrats is the people have seen through your nonsense and they want to change. By the way, just a personal note, I was, as gentle listeners, as your faithful podcast host here, well, one of them obviously, Mr. Mark, but I was listening, looking early the morning after the election, to look for the results, and I saw, it looks like Labour's won by 4 votes in the by-election, which they had. And then there was a complete recount, and they lost by 6 votes. So good news all round. But yes, it's that's the message I take away from it. The message that it sends to these parties of the, I guess we call it the liberal elite, the globalists who have been running the country for so many years. That they're just not wanted anymore. They're out of touch, and
yes.
I understand analysts have come to the conclusion that they reached reform. That is, reached about 30% of the vote. Now, 30% of the vote is seen as a tipping point when you get to the general election. So, if it does carry over, they're going to be a major force. Now, if they get to 40%, they're going to win.
Absolutely.
So we'll see what happens.
Well, yes, and in fact, the leader, Nigel Farage, who appeared actually at the count of the result of the by-election, declared and said that his party had taken on the responsibility of the key things that really should have been addressed by the Labour Party, and he seemed to delight in the fact that, as he said, we can see that support for the Labour Party has collapsed within 10 months of them winning the general election. And what he then went on to say is that he thinks that they have supplanted the Conservative Party now as the main opposition party in government. Now, technically, that's not obviously the case in actual Parliament, but when it comes to the local elections, one of the things that Nigel Farage has highlighted is that when you look at the core base of any party, it tends to be driven by the local elections, those people who are going out constantly campaigning, funding, and really driving support. Now, when you lose that side of the election, albeit that we know that certainly local council elections and even by-elections can often be a protest vote, you are starting to see a major change because of the significant numbers. Now, here's the thing. I actually think that whilst this is damaging, this is my perspective, definitely for the Labour Party. They've certainly had a bloody
Yeah.
nose when it comes to the election results. But I think it's even more damaging for the Conservatives on a number of fronts, not just because they seem to not be getting their message across, but most importantly, is that where do they go? Labour are still in power. So they've still got another 4 years to do something about this, whereas the Tories cannot. And although they are technically in opposition, clearly that voice is not being heard. So, really, I do agree with Nigel Farage and the principle that they are Reform UK is becoming almost like the opposition, the sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
opposition in waiting. But maybe they are next government in waiting. How realistic do you
Yes.
think that could be?
Well, it is realistic that they could form the next government. That's what. But I think, in all likelihood, if that were the case, it would be a minority government. Now, that's not so good. What we want them is for them to
Yeah.
win outright. By minority government, I guess people in the UK will be used to this, but just for our other listeners, um, by minority government, we mean that they don't get more votes than all the other parties added together. Don't get more MPs than all the other parties added together. That means in order to get the votes together to form a government, you basically have to show the king that you've got enough, got more
Yes.
votes than anyone else, so that you can pass legislation. So you'll have to have deals with other parties, and that's what I mean by it's not ideal. I think that they could get more votes, more MPs because of more votes to other people than the other parties, but I don't. At the moment, if it's in the 30s, they're not. Then it's not going to be enough. The low 30%,
Yeah.
which he's looking at now. But they've got, it's years to go,
Well,
so
there
they've got
are.
enough
I
enough
think we
time to
should
make
add a
that up.
little bit of balance on this. So the Liberals, yes, the Liberal Democrats. Now, the party leader, Sir Ed Davey, I know you're a big fan,
Yes.
not.
Yeah, big fan on
Now
this
he
show. Yeah,
said that
absolutely. Yeah.
the Liberal Democrats were the new party of Middle England. Is that so? I don't know where he's coming from, and I'm not sure what substance he's been taking.
Yes.
But let me ask you on this, because there's no doubt that tactical voting does play into any election. Where do you think the Liberal Democrats stand when it comes to not just the results, because they did have a reasonable set of results, but just in the overall positioning politically?
Well, the thing is with the Liberal Democrats, they just to give people a bit of history of their strategy, which has been effective, but also their downfall. Now, how they've been effective is they concentrate very much in their campaigning on local concerns. So the policies they put forward are to solve local problems, that sort of thing. So that means in a by-election you can win some MPs, not in this particular seat, but they are able to do that occasion, and you can form quite a few councils. But when it comes to performing in a national general election, that doesn't help you because then you're not known for having a good voice for what people want across the country on national issues, on the important issues that are important to people as a whole across the country. So I think that they're a mess in terms of their response to all the issues that are facing us nationally
Yeah.
because of that, because they've been really been focusing on local issues, which is good and bad. I mean, we want good councillors, we want good local MPs. So, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's bad for them as a party. They're never going to be an important national party as long as they continue with that strategy.
Well, I agree, and it'll be interesting to see what does happen and whether that momentum continues. Clearly, we can see some change. Well, we'll see how it unfolds as Parliament sort of continues. Can Labour
Yeah.
change the situation or not? Let's move on to another story. Now, this is a completely
Yes.
different one, and I'm going to say it's the same old story. If you are told that you are extremely old, then try releasing your inner child. With nothing to withhold, just be very bold as an excuse to go really wild. Yes, well, it seems that Ethel Caterham, who is from the UK, has become the oldest person in the world. Yes, at just
Yeah.
over 115 years of age, she became the oldest person in the world as a result of the death of the Brazilian nun sister Ina Canabara Lucas, who at the time was 116. Now, Miss Caterham was born on the 21st of August, 1909, and is the last surviving subject of Edward VII. Remarkably, of course, as many people will know through history, she would have seen, of course, the First World War, the Second World War, and many other wars to come, as we saw. Now, the fact is that she celebrates, of course, 115th birthday, and this was back in August 2024, and she didn't know why there was all that fuss.
Yes.
Now, of course, as she gets older and older by every day, well, she is now reaching, of course, the Guinness Book of Records if she continues. Now, Mr. Pete, I ask you, what's this fascination with age? And certainly being the oldest person in the world, the spotlight is on you. What guidance have you got for Ethel?
Well, there's the fascination with it is all the things you mentioned. It's fascinating to be able to reach back through time in history to someone who is actually alive, not just in the last century, but the one before that. I mean, that's quite remarkable, isn't it? And you don't forget that it's because we're not that long into the century. So she's 115 years, 252 days. So she's been around for a long, long time, as you say, gone through all those historical moments. So that's just interesting, just by itself. That's interesting. And then there's the idea comes into your mind immediately. What can I do to live longer? I don't want to die. And so you think, well, what are their secrets? Now I have a quote here that she attributes her long life, does Ethel, to avoiding arguments, maintaining a positive mental attitude, embracing opportunities. I agree with all those things, and practicing moderation.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess you. So, that's basically all we have to do. So, we can all live forever. So, no, I think that's interesting. It's interesting also. I'm just going to point this out because it's something we mentioned quite often a few years ago on the show. COVID-19. She had COVID-19. And she recovered.
Yes.
At the age of 110.
Yes.
Yeah, so it just showed it wasn't as bad as they all said. Yeah. So what I say we can learn from this is, yes, she's had a long life. She's had various experiences. She's worked as a nanny in India, I think. She founded a nursery in Hong Kong. It says here. She was married to Norman Caterham, who was a British Army major. She's had a good, rich life, even if she practiced moderation. So, yeah, we can learn a lot from that. Now, what I think we can also learn is it looks like when it comes to longevity, 120 is about the limit.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because of course, when you think about it, she probably has certainly, as you say, the right type of approach to life. She also came from a family who have lived or did live for quite some time. I mean, she had one of her sisters, who was Gladys, lived to be 104. So, it's not unique to her alone. Clearly, there's something in the genes there that sort of allowed her to perhaps with good, careful living and the right sort of attitude to be able to live to this age. But it is incredible, isn't it, about the fascination that we have with living long. Now, again, there is a bit of luck, isn't there? Because if you don't get a major illness, or you don't have an accident or something like that's just one of those things. But what I find quite extraordinary is all of the events that she's actually witnessed. She's even witnessed the sinking of the Titanic, the Russian Revolution, the Great Depression, and many other things. I mean, goodness me, she's even lived through the Mark and Pete podcast era. I mean,
yes, I'm sure she was
and survived.
Yeah,
it's just quite extraordinary.
Yes, that's rare. That's rare. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, look, we wish Ethel a longer life to come and many more birthdays, and let's keep our track of that story. Now we move on to a different one. Now this one is basically stacks to talk about. Folk who hoard are like busy squirrels, just gathering throughout the day, but no one can find them anymore because they're simply packed away. Yes, Well, it seems to be a growing problem. What many people in the UK are saying basically is a mental health emergency that basically has sort of blighted many people in the United Kingdom. Now, it seems that there's an estimate of 2 to 5% of the UK population may have a hoarding disorder, whereby the World Health Organization has classified as a mental health condition. Now, what causes people to hoard goods and materials is really still open for debate. But, Mr. Pete, I ask you, is this just a hobby gone wrong, or is there something else underlining the problem?
Well, I think that the that hoarding, as far as I understand the classification of this particular mental health problem, was part of seen previously as a subtype of obsessive compulsive disorder. And when you're an obsessive compulsive, one of the issues is trying to control the reason you're obsessive compulsive about something. It's something you can control, something you can grasp. Maybe at a time when the rest of your life is out of control, or the rest of the world is out of control.
Yes.
So we can see that hoarding, as a subset of that, now with its own classification, as you noted, that hoarding is a way of getting control of your life. This is something I can do. I can collect these things, and you become obsessed with it, and your collection is growing, even though the world's falling apart. At least your collection is safe. That's my little sort of amateur armchair psychiatrist view of it, but that's what I do. I do see. So it's something you can do that you can take you out of the worries of this world by getting. And it could be various different things. I think hoarding can be one of them. But if it's not something that's like a hobbyist type collecting, you're not collecting, you know, dolls of Michelle Obama, whatever it might be. You're instead hoarding toilet paper, for example, because
Mm.
you think there's going to be an apocalypse. Then it can be more, I think, the same sort of motivation, but with fear and existential dread an expectation of existential doom.
Yes.
Um, this is really getting rather depressive. So anyway, yes,
Well,
with that sort of taking hold, gripping you, you can
yeah.
end up hoarding. So classifying itself is all very well, but my question is, Mark, and to the psychiatrists who made this classification, what are you going to do about it? Now
Yes.
you've classified it.
What are you
What's the
going to do?
solution?
Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting. We're going to actually sort of call upon some examples that have been put out into the media, but there's a chap called David, and he's been living at home. Unfortunately, certain events sort of caused some of his hoarding condition. After his father's death, he became a carer for his mother, who had dementia. And now he's living there on his own after she died. So obviously, there's the trauma of the loss of the parents. Unfortunately, as a result, this has meant that he, being David, has now continued to sort of hoard things. It goes from anything from porcelain figurines, hundreds of newspapers, and in fact, even down to mention about dolls, thousands of Barbie dolls. Now, what's interesting is that according to statistics, 4 in 10 of the people who typically tend to hoard are over the age of 60. David, in this particular case, is 65. Now, the doctors are aware of his condition and have been calling upon him. Unfortunately, one particular doctor called at his house, but the entrance was blocked, and that meant that people couldn't get into his house. So, one of the solutions is to find ways of decluttering, effectively overcoming what either is deemed to be a crisis event or something which is causing them to have this particular problem. And it's not an easy one because what I would say is from most doctors, from the way that they're coining this, is they're saying that it really is by individual. So
Yeah.
everybody who would hoard would either have started because they had a collection that got out of hand, or
Yeah,
had an issue because there was a crisis in their life, or something else that was
exactly.
causing that, because either they were living in a very small space and it just, the possessions got out of hand. So, this is something that's quite serious, but it doesn't just affect the United Kingdom. There are 14 million people in the United States exhibiting signs of hoarding disorder, and again, they will all have different stories. So it seems to be that you mentioned something a little bit around, COVID. We've also seen the economic scenario
Yes,
happening,
yeah,
and many other things that have been going on in our world that maybe has been sort of prompting people to sort of go this way. But nevertheless, it seems to me that the solution is don't just simply go in isolation. You have to talk,
yeah,
you have to speak, whether it be with family, with friends, with doctors, whomever. But the point being is that if you do find yourself in this situation, it makes sense to reach out. I think that would be something that I'm sure that you would probably agree. And I know that with you
yeah.
previously working in local communities, that's something that you probably encourage.
Yes, yeah. I mean, yes. If you have a problem, or if you're not the person having a problem, but you observe this issue, it's best not to keep quiet. It's best to say. It's always best to talk to someone, even if it's someone in confidence in the first instance. But I would say choose wisely who you speak to. Don't just go blabbering around a relative or someone who you think has a problem, or even if you have this problem yourself. Select who you talk to, maybe to your church leader or local priest, a psychiatrist, someone or someone you know personally who you can trust. But don't keep quiet about it. If you have a problem, don't suffer in silence. That's the last thing you should do. It's always better to seek help. Seeking help. You see, as a wise man once said, seeking help isn't giving up. Seeking help is refusing to give up.
Yes. Well, listeners, what do you think about some of the subjects that we've talked about? Do you have any suggestions in terms of how you can help people? Maybe you've got an opinion on the political foundations that seem to be shaking with reform making radical progress in the United Kingdom. Maybe you've got some thoughts on what Ethel should be doing as she continues to be the oldest person in the world. And what do you suggest about those who are hoarding? Yes. Any last minute thoughts, Mr. Pete?
Yes, well, simply to say to our listeners, just make sure you subscribe, because if you go to markandp.com, you can subscribe to this podcast, and then you can leave a comment, as you just suggested, on this, but on every single episode, and we'll be sure to read them because they'll be highlighted to us, and you'll be featured in a future episode. But for this week, for Mark and myself, it's goodbye, and catch you next time.